In the rugged foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, a weathered veteran finds solace in rescuing abused animals. Little did he know that saving a wounded German shepherd would lead to an extraordinary encounter with wild lions that would change his life forever. As dawn breaks over the expansive wildlife sanctuary, Marcus Riley adjusts his prosthetic leg before beginning his morning patrol, carrying with him the scars of war and a profound determination to protect the creatures that helped heal his deepest wounds. The crisp mountain air fills Marcus's lungs as he navigates his well-worn pickup truck along the bumpy service roads of Whispering Pines Wildlife Sanctuary. The morning fog clings to the landscape, transforming the dense pine forests and rolling meadows into a mystical tableau. This remote corner of Northern California, nestled between jagged mountain peaks and hidden valleys, has become Marcus's sanctuary, a place where the ghosts of his past don't follow quite so closely. At 43, Marcus carries himself with the disciplined posture of his military past, though the lines around his eyes tell stories of both hardship and healing. 10 years have passed since he returned from his third deployment, his body forever changed by an IED explosion that claimed his right leg below the knee. The physical wounds healed faster than the invisible ones. Post-traumatic stress disorder, the doctors called it, clinical language that failed to capture the way combat had rewired his brain, leaving him hyper-vigilant, quick to startle, and increasingly isolated from the world he'd fought to protect. Conventional therapy had helped, but it was here, among the abandoned and injured animals at Whispering Pines, that Marcus found his true path to recovery. What began as volunteer work during his rehabilitation had evolved into a full-time position as the sanctuary's security and maintenance manager. The founder, Dr. Eleanor Winters, had recognized something in the troubled veteran, a gentleness beneath the hardened exterior, a capacity for connection with creatures that had also experienced trauma. Animals know, she'd told him during his interview 5 years ago. They can sense when someone understands their pain. Marcus had nodded, uncomfortable with how accurately she'd read him, but grateful for the opportunity. Each morning follows. The same routine, a structure that grounds him in the present. He checks the perimeter fence that keeps the sanctuary's 100 acres secure, inspects the various enclosures, housing everything from birds of prey with broken wings to foxes recovering from leg traps, and ensures the special section housing. The sanctuary's most unique residence, 3 rescued African lions, remains intact. The lions, an aging male named Caesar and 2 females, Nala and Zara, had been confiscated from an illegal exotic animal collector years before Marcus arrived. Too habituated to humans for release back to the wild, they would live out their days at Whispering Pines, ambassadors for their species, and a powerful reminder of humanity's complicated relationship with wildlife. Marcus keeps a respectful distance from the big cats, unlike some of the other staff who had raised them from cubs. He admires their majesty from afar, watching how they move with predatory grace even in captivity. Sometimes, when the nightmares are particularly bad, he drives out before dawn and parks near their enclosure, finding strange comfort in their occasional roars that pierce the darkness, a reminder that there are forces in the world more powerful than the memories that haunt him. Today's patrol seems routine until Marcus notices something unusual along the northeastern boundary, fresh tire tracks cutting across a rarely used fire road. Trespassing isn't uncommon. The sanctuary occasionally deals with thrill seekers, hoping to photograph the lions, or worse, poachers interested in the various species housed on the property. Marcus radios back to the main compound. Possible breach at Sector 7, he reports, keeping his voice calm and professional. "I'm checking it out." "Copy that," comes Dr. Winters' steady reply. "Backup needed?" "Negative. Just tracks for now. Will advise." Marcus follows the tire impressions, noting they're fresh, likely from the previous night. The tracks lead toward an area where the boundary fence runs alongside private property, a large cattle ranch owned by the Hendersons, longtime neighbors, with whom the sanctuary has maintained a cordial if occasionally strained relationship. Some months back, Mr. Henderson had complained about predators threatening his livestock, insinuating that the sanctuary's presence attracted unwanted wildlife to the area. The boundary fence appears intact until Marcus rounds a sharp bend in the road. Here, the fence has been deliberately cut, the wire mesh sliced in a clean line spanning several feet. Professional work, not the haphazard damage typical of opportunistic trespassers. Marcus's military training kicks in, his senses heightening as he scans the surrounding area for any sign of movement or danger. A soft, whimpering sound catches his attention, barely audible over the gentle rustle of pine needles in the morning. Breeze. Marcus follows the sound, moving with deliberate quiet despite his prosthetic years of practice, allowing him to navigate the uneven terrain with minimal noise. The whimpering grows louder as he approaches a dense thicket about 50 yards inside the sanctuary's boundary. What he discovers sends a surge of cold anger through his veins. A German shepherd, severely injured and entangled in barbed wire, has been deliberately left there. The dog's sleek, black and tan coat is matted with blood, its powerful body now weak from what appears to be hours of struggling against the cruel metal barbs that dig into its flesh. Despite its condition, the animal's amber eyes remain alert, watching Marcus with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. This was no accident. The barbed wire has been wrapped around the dog multiple times, securing it to a fallen log in a manner that prevented escape, but ensured prolonged suffering. Someone wanted this animal to die slowly, painfully, and they wanted it found on sanctuary property. "Hey there," Marcus says softly, crouching down at a distance that won't further frighten the injured animal. "I'm not going to hurt you." The German shepherd regards him warily, a low growl rumbling in its throat despite its weakened state. Marcus recognizes the response, not aggression, but self-preservation. He's seen the same reaction in fellow veterans, pushed to their limits, the instinctive protection of one's vulnerability when already wounded. "I get it," he continues, in the same gentle tone, slowly removing his backpack to retrieve a water bottle and a small first aid kit he always carries. "Trust doesn't come easy, but I'm going to help you out of this mess if you'll let me." For several minutes, Marcus simply sits, occasionally talking to the dog in soothing tones while making no move to approach. Patience was something combat had taught him, the ability to remain still, present and focused, even when every instinct screamed for action. Gradually, the German shepherd's growls subside, replaced by that pitiful whimpering that first caught Marcus's attention. When he finally edges closer, Marcus can see the dog is wearing a worn leather collar with no tags. The animal is clearly no stray. Its muscular build and alert expression speak of training and human companionship, making its current situation all the more disturbing. Who would do this to their own dog? Or had the animal been stolen, used as a pawn in someone's grudge against the sanctuary? "I'm going to touch you now," Marcus warns, moving with deliberate slowness as he reaches for the water bottle. The dog flinches, but doesn't snap when he carefully pours water into his cupped hand, offering it to the parched animal. After a moment's hesitation, a rough tongue laps desperately at the liquid. "That's it," Marcus encourages. "We've got to start. The real challenge comes next." The barbed wire is wrapped tightly, with multiple strands cutting into the dog's hind, legs, torso and neck. Any attempt to remove it will cause additional pain before bringing relief. Marcus radios back to the main compound, requesting veterinary assistance, but Dr. Winters informs him their vet is at least an hour away on an emergency call at another facility. "Be careful, Marcus," Dr. Winters cautions. "An injured animal that size—" "I know the risks," he interrupts, his voice gentle but firm. "I've got wire cutters in the truck. Send whoever's available to meet me, but I'm starting now. Marcus returns to his pickup, retrieving heavy-duty wire cutters, thick leather gloves, and an emergency veterinary kit the sanctuary keeps for field incidents. Throughout his military career and after, Marcus has found purpose in decisive action. The calculated risks of intervention versus non-intervention form the backbone of his training. And now, faced with this animal's suffering, the calculation is simple. He cannot stand by and watch another being in pain. Back at the thicket, the German shepherd has grown weaker, its breathing shallow and rapid. Marcus approaches again, speaking continuously in that same steady, calming voice. "I won't lie to you, buddy. This is going to hurt before it gets better," he says, pulling on the thick gloves. "But I promise you're getting out of here today." The dog's eyes, dulled by pain yet still watchful, seem to assess him with an intelligence that strikes Marcus as profound. In that moment of silent communication, something shifts. A fragile trust forms, born of shared suffering and the universal desire to be free from pain. With careful movements, Marcus begins the painstaking process of cutting away the barbed wire. Each snip of the cutters must be precise, avoiding further injury while gradually loosening the cruel metal's grip. The dog whimpers and occasionally growls as particularly embedded barbs pull free, but remarkably, it doesn't attempt to bite, seeming to understand on some level that this temporary pain serves a greater purpose. Sweat beads on Marcus's forehead as he works, the morning sun now burning through the fog and raising the temperature. He talks constantly to the dog, a stream of reassurances and praise that serves to calm them both. "You're doing great. Just a few more. Brave boy. Almost there." When the last strand finally gives way, Marcus gently helps the German shepherd stand, supporting its weight as the animal tests its newly freed limbs. Blood seeps from dozens of puncture wounds, but none appear to have hit arteries or vital organs. A small mercy in an otherwise cruel situation. "I'm calling you Ranger," Marcus decides, the name coming to him unbidden. "Because you've got the heart of a soldier." Ranger stands unsteadily, leaning against Marcus's leg for support, his amber eyes now fixed on his rescuer with what can only be described as gratitude. The transformation is remarkable, from fearful, defensive animal to a creature willing to trust despite its ordeal. Marcus feels a connection forming, an unspoken understanding that transcends the usual boundaries between human and animal. As he carefully guides Ranger toward his pickup truck, Marcus glances back at the cut fence and deliberately placed barbed wire. This was no random act of cruelty, but a calculated message. Someone wanted to hurt the sanctuary by forcing them to witness suffering they couldn't prevent. The thought firms his resolve to discover who was behind this, even as he focuses on the more immediate need of getting Ranger proper medical attention. What Marcus doesn't realize, as he gently lifts the injured German shepherd into his truck, is that their encounter has been observed. From the elevated rocks overlooking the thicket, 3 pairs of watchful eyes have followed every moment of the rescue. Caesar, Nala, and Zara, the sanctuary's lion trio, out on their morning supervised release into the larger enclosure that encompasses this section of the property. Their handler, standing at a respectful distance, has allowed them to watch the unfolding drama with feline curiosity. The lion's intense focus on the interaction between man and dog, their unusual stillness, as they observe rather than prowl, goes unnoticed by Marcus. But this moment marks the beginning of something extraordinary, a chain of events that will challenge everything Marcus understands about animal consciousness, loyalty, and the unexpected bonds that can form between the most unlikely of companions. With Ranger secured in the passenger seat, Marcus navigates the truck back toward the sanctuary's main compound. The German shepherd pants heavily, his body trembling from shock and blood loss, but his eyes remain fixed on Marcus with unwavering trust. Occasionally, Marcus reaches over to gently stroke the dog's head, careful to avoid the wounds that mar his powerful frame. "Stay with me, buddy," he urges as the truck bounces over the uneven terrain. "We're almost there." The sanctuary's main compound consists of a cluster of rustic buildings, a large barn converted into medical facilities, administrative offices, housed in a renovated farmhouse, and several smaller structures for staff housing and storage. As Marcus pulls up to the medical building, Dr. Eleanor Winters emerges, her silver hair pulled back in a practical braid, her weathered face a map of concern and competence. At 62, she carries herself with the quiet authority of someone who has dedicated her life to wildlife rehabilitation, her reputation in conservation circles near legendary. "My God," she breathes, getting her first look at Ranger as Marcus carefully lifts him from the truck. "Deliberate?" "No question," Marcus confirms grimly. "Someone cut our fence, wrapped him in barbed wire, and left him to suffer where we'd find him." Eleanor's expression hardens as she leads them into the medical facility, directing Marcus to place Ranger on the central examination table. The building smells of antiseptic and animal, a clean but primal scent that Marcus has come to associate with healing. "Lisa's still an hour out," Eleanor says, referring to their veterinarian. "But we'll start treatment. I've worked with domestic dogs before." For the next 40 minutes, Marcus assists as Eleanor cleans and treats Ranger's numerous wounds. The German Shepherd remains remarkably cooperative, whimpering occasionally when the antiseptic touches particularly deep cuts, but otherwise staying still, as if understanding these strangers are helping him. When necessary, Marcus murmurs reassurances, his hand resting gently on the uninjured parts of Ranger's body, grounding the animal through touch and voice. "He's been trained," Eleanor observes as she carefully stitches a particularly deep gash on Ranger's flank. "Military or police, I'd guess. Look at how he's tolerating all this. That's not just good temperament, that's conditioning." Marcus nods, having noticed the same signs. The way Ranger responds to firm, clear commands, how he maintains eye contact, the disciplined stillness despite pain. Someone invested time in him, makes this all the more twisted. As Eleanor finishes the last suture, the radio on her belt crackles to life. "Dr. Winters, we've got a situation at the lion enclosure," comes the tense voice of Cal Jenkins, one of the sanctuary's most experienced animal handlers. "Caesar is acting unusual." Eleanor frowns, glancing at Marcus. Caesar, the male lion, is generally the most predictable of the three big cats, having settled into a routine of majestic indifference years ago. "Unusual how?" she queries into the radio. He's pacing the fence line nearest to the medical building, won't respond to usual enrichment. Nala and Zara are following his lead. I've never seen them this fixated. A prickle of unease travels down Marcus's spine. The medical building sits approximately 200 yards from the lion enclosure, separated by the central courtyard and administrative offices. While the lions can sometimes hear or smell the various animals brought in for treatment, they rarely show particular interest. "Keep them in the restricted section," Eleanor instructs Cal. "Lisa will check them when she arrives." She turns to Marcus. "Can you stay with Ranger? He seems to respond well to you, and I don't want him tearing out. Those stitches if he panics. I need to check on the mountain lion cub that came in yesterday anyway." Marcus nods, settling onto a stool beside the examination table where Ranger now rests, sedated but conscious, his amber eyes half-lidded but still tracking Marcus's movements. For several minutes after Eleanor leaves, man and dog exist in companionable silence, the only sounds being Ranger's rhythmic breathing and the distant calls of birds outside. The tranquility is broken by a deep, resonant roar that seems to vibrate through the building's very foundations. Ranger's ears prick forward, his body tensing despite the sedation. A second roar follows, then a third, all three lions calling in sequence, their voices creating an eerie harmony that raises the hair on Marcus's arms. Through the building's single window, Marcus can just make out the lion enclosure in the distance. What he sees sends a chill through him. Caesar, magnificent even at a distance, stands pressed against the fence, his massive body rigid with attention, his gaze directed unerringly toward the medical building. Behind him, Nala and Zara pace in tight circles, occasionally joining his calls with their own. Marcus's radio crackles. "Marcus!" comes Eleanor's tense voice. "Are you seeing this?" "Affirmative," he responds, military terseness returning in the face of the unusual situation. "Any idea what's triggered them?" There's a pause before Eleanor responds. Cal thinks it might be Ranger, the dog. Marcus looks down at the injured German shepherd, who has managed to lift his head, ears alert despite his weakened state. How would they even know he's here? Scent, possibly. You walked through their outdoor enclosure area this morning. You might have carried Ranger's scent back with you on your clothes, boots. It's plausible, but doesn't fully explain the lion's intense reaction. Marcus has rescued injured animals before, has certainly carried various scents back to the compound, yet has never witnessed behavior like this from the big cats. "Want me to move him to another building?" Marcus asks. "No," Eleanor decides after a moment. He's stable, and moving him risks opening those wounds. Lisa should be here soon. Just keep an eye on the situation. As if responding to her words, the lions fall suddenly silent. Through the window, Marcus watches as Caesar turns, away from the fence, his tail lashing once before he stalks toward the concrete shelter within the enclosure. Nala and Zara follow, their synchronized movements speaking to the tight social bonds between the three cats. The strange interlude over, Marcus returns his attention to Ranger, who has relaxed somewhat but remains more alert than his injured state should allow. "What was that about, huh?" Marcus murmurs, gently stroking the dog's neck above the bandages. "You got some history with big cats I should know about?" Ranger's response is to lean his head into Marcus's hand, seeking more contact. The simple gesture of trust from an animal that has every reason to fear humans brings a lump to Marcus's throat. In his years at the sanctuary, he's developed professional relationships with many animals, respecting their wildness while caring for their needs. But something about Ranger feels different, more personal, as if the dog has somehow recognized in Marcus a kindred wounded spirit. When Lisa, the sanctuary's veterinarian, finally arrives, she confirms Eleanor's emergency treatment was appropriate and adds antibiotics and stronger pain management to Ranger's care. The German Shepherd's prognosis is good, provided infection doesn't set in. The deeper question, what to do with him once healed, remains unanswered. "He's not microchipped," Lisa informs them after scanning Ranger thoroughly. "And that collar is generic, available at any pet store. No identifying information. Could check with local police departments, military facilities," Marcus suggests. "He's got specialized training based on his behavior." Eleanor nods thoughtfully. "We will. But Marcus..." She hesitates, exchanging a look with Lisa. "If someone did this to him deliberately, they may come looking to finish the job." The implication hangs heavy in the air, leaving Ranger vulnerable. To whoever had tortured him isn't an option any of them can stomach. Yet keeping him at the sanctuary raises complex questions about their mission and resources. Whispering Pines exists primarily for wildlife rehabilitation, not as a domestic animal shelter. "I'll take responsibility for him," Marcus says, the decision forming even as the words leave his mouth. "At least until we figure out who he belongs to, or belong to." Eleanor studies him, her keen gray eyes missing nothing. "Your cabin's small." "Big enough for two," Marcus counters. His accommodation, a modest one-bedroom structure on the sanctuary's edge, is simple but functional, a step up from the barracks and tents he's called home during much of his adult life. "It's against protocol," Lisa points out, though her tone lacks conviction. "Then change the protocol," Marcus responds, surprising himself with the intensity of his reaction. "He was left on our property. That makes him our responsibility." Eleanor's mouth quirks in the ghost of a smile. "I'll make some calls about temporary fostering paperwork. For now, let's get him stabilized. He stays in medical overnight, no exceptions." As the afternoon wanes into evening, Marcus completes his patrol duties, writes up detailed incident reports about the fence breach, and checks on the sanctuary's other residents. Yet his thoughts repeatedly return to Ranger, to the resilience in those amber eyes, to the way the dog leaned into his touch, despite having every reason to distrust human contact. After finishing his shift, Marcus returns to the medical building. The main lights have been dimmed for the night, with only the soft glow of monitoring equipment illuminating the space. Ranger lifts his head as Marcus enters, a slight wag of his tail conveying recognition. "Just checking on you," Marcus explains softly, moving to the German Shepherd's side. Ranger's numerous bandages stand out starkly against his dark fur, but his breathing seems easier, his eyes clearer, signs the pain medication and antibiotics are working. Marcus settles onto the floor beside Ranger's low recovery bed, his back against the wall, legs stretched out before him. He doesn't intend to stay long. He simply wants to reassure himself that the dog is resting comfortably. But the events of the day have taken their toll, and the quiet rhythm of Ranger's breathing lulls Marcus into a state of unusual calm. He doesn't realize he's fallen asleep until a sound jerks him awake, the deep, distinctive roar of a lion, followed by another, then a third. Marcus checks his watch, 3:17 a.m. Outside, the sanctuary lies bathed in moonlight, peaceful except for the continued vocalizations from the lion enclosure. At the sound, Ranger has raised his head, ears pricked, forward body tense despite his injuries. But there's no fear in his posture, only intense, focused attention. Through the window, Marcus can just make out the silhouettes of all three lions, standing at the fence line closest to the medical building, their powerful bodies outlined in silver by the moon. Even at this distance, he can feel the weight of their collective gaze, the intentionality of their calls. "What do they want with you?" Marcus whispers, his hand finding Ranger's head in the dimness. The German Shepherd turns to look at him, and in the moonlight streaming through the window, those amber eyes seem to hold knowledge beyond animal understanding, a wisdom born of suffering and survival. Then, with deliberate care despite his injuries, Ranger shifts his body, pressing closer to Marcus's side in a gesture that seems simultaneously protective and seeking protection. Outside, the lions continue their vigil, their occasional calls echoing across the sanctuary grounds, creating an eerie serenade that follows Marcus back into uneasy dreams. As consciousness fades, one certainty remains. The events unfolding around Ranger are far from ordinary, and the connection forming between man, dog, and lions hints at mysteries beyond his current understanding. Dawn arrives with a gentle golden light filtering through the sanctuary's pine trees. Marcus awakens with a stiff neck and back, the result of spending most of the night on the floor beside Ranger's recovery bed. The German Shepherd is already awake, amber eyes tracking Marcus's movements as he stretches and rises. "Morning, buddy," Marcus murmurs, checking the bandages covering Ranger's wounds. None show signs of fresh bleeding, a good sign. The dog's temperature feels normal under Marcus's palm, another positive indicator that infection hasn't set in. Ranger acknowledges the greeting with a slight thump of his tail against the padded bed. The medical building door opens, and Eleanor enters, carrying 2 steaming mugs. The scent of strong coffee fills the room as she hands one to Marcus. "You weren't in your cabin," she remarks, her tone neutral, but her eyes assessing both man and dog. Cal said the lions were vocal all night. As the afternoon wanes into evening, Marcus completes his patrol duties, writes up detailed incident reports about the fence breach, and checks on the sanctuary's other residents. Yet his thoughts repeatedly return to Ranger, to the resilience in those amber eyes, to the way the dog leaned into his touch, despite having every reason to distrust human contact. After finishing his shift, Marcus returns to the medical building. The main lights have been dimmed for the night, with only the soft glow of monitoring equipment illuminating the space. Ranger lifts his head as Marcus enters, a slight wag of his tail conveying recognition. "Just checking on you," Marcus explains softly, moving to the German Shepherd's side. Ranger's numerous bandages stand out starkly against his dark fur, but his breathing seems easier, his eyes clearer, signs the pain medication and antibiotics are working. Marcus settles onto the floor beside Ranger's low recovery bed, his back against the wall, legs stretched out before him. He doesn't intend to stay long. He simply wants to reassure himself that the dog is resting comfortably. But the events of the day have taken their toll, and the quiet rhythm of Ranger's breathing lulls Marcus into a state of unusual calm. He doesn't realize he's fallen asleep until a sound jerks him awake, the deep, distinctive roar of a lion, followed by another, then a third. Marcus checks his watch, 3:17 a.m. Outside, the sanctuary lies bathed in moonlight, peaceful except for the continued vocalizations from the lion enclosure. At the sound, Ranger has raised his head, ears pricked, forward body tense despite his injuries. But there's no fear in his posture, only intense, focused attention. Through the window, Marcus can just make out the silhouettes of all three lions, standing at the fence line closest to the medical building, their powerful bodies outlined in silver by the moon. Even at this distance, he can feel the weight of their collective gaze, the intentionality of their calls. "What do they want with you?" Marcus whispers, his hand finding Ranger's head in the dimness. The German Shepherd turns to look at him, and in the moonlight streaming through the window, those amber eyes seem to hold knowledge beyond animal understanding, a wisdom born of suffering and survival. Then, with deliberate care despite his injuries, Ranger shifts his body, pressing closer to Marcus's side in a gesture that seems simultaneously protective and seeking protection. Outside, the lions continue their vigil, their occasional calls echoing across the sanctuary grounds, creating an eerie serenade that follows Marcus back into uneasy dreams. As consciousness fades, one certainty remains. The events unfolding around Ranger are far from ordinary, and the connection forming between man, dog, and lions hints at mysteries beyond his current understanding. Dawn arrives with a gentle golden light filtering through the sanctuary's pine trees. Marcus awakens with a stiff neck and back, the result of spending most of the night on the floor beside Ranger's recovery bed. The German Shepherd is already awake, amber eyes tracking Marcus's movements as he stretches and rises. "Morning, buddy," Marcus murmurs, checking the bandages covering Ranger's wounds. None show signs of fresh bleeding, a good sign. The dog's temperature feels normal under Marcus's palm, another positive indicator that infection hasn't set in. Ranger acknowledges the greeting with a slight thump of his tail against the padded bed. The medical building door opens, and Eleanor enters, carrying 2 steaming mugs. The scent of strong coffee fills the room as she hands one to Marcus. "You weren't in your cabin," she remarks, her tone neutral, but her eyes assessing both man and dog. "Cal said the lions were vocal all night." Marcus accepts the coffee gratefully. "Started around 3 in the morning, all 3 of them, calling in sequence. They were at the fence line, looking this way." He hesitates, aware of how strange his next observation will sound. They seem to be trying to communicate something. To her credit, Eleanor doesn't dismiss his impression. After 35 years working with wildlife, she's developed a healthy respect for animal intelligence and behavior patterns that defy Simple explanation. Lisa's on her way to check them. No obvious physical problems when Cal did feeding this morning, but their behavior remains unusual. Unusual how? Marcus asks, sipping the hot coffee. They refused morning enrichment. Caesar kept watching the path between their enclosure and this building. Nala paced the perimeter repeatedly, and Zara barely touched her food. Eleanor studies Ranger thoughtfully. In 20 years of working with those three, I've never seen them this fixated on anything. Before Marcus can respond, the radio at Eleanor's belt crackles to life. "Dr. Winters," comes Lisa's voice, tight with controlled tension. "I need you. At the lion enclosure, now." Eleanor exchanges a quick glance with Marcus before responding. "On my way. What's happening?" Caesar is refusing to enter the separation pen for examination. When Cal tried to encourage him with meat, Lisa's professional composure slips momentarily. He carried it to the fence line and dropped it. He's done this 3 times now. Dropped. It where exactly? Eleanor asks, though her expression suggests she already suspects the answer. On the path leading to the medical building. A heavy silence fills the room as the implication settles. Lions are apex predators, not known for sharing food voluntarily, especially not with potential competitors. The behavior Lisa describes contradicts fundamental predatory instincts. "I'll be right there," Eleanor says before clicking off the radio. She turns to Marcus. "Stay with Ranger. I want to see this for myself." After Eleanor departs, Marcus checks Ranger's water bowl, refilling it from a nearby pitcher. The German Shepherd drinks thirstily, further evidence of his improving condition. When finished, he looks up at Marcus expectantly. "You need to go outside?" Marcus guesses. Ranger's ears perk forward at the word outside, confirming Marcus's suspicion. Despite his military discipline and professional detachment, Marcus finds himself smiling at the dog's obvious intelligence. "Let's see if you can stand," he suggests, helping Ranger maneuver his bandaged body to the edge of the low recovery bed. With careful movements, the German Shepherd eases himself down, legs wobbling slightly but holding his weight. Marcus keeps a supportive hand under the dog's chest, mindful of the stitched wounds as they slowly make their way to the door. The morning air is crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant wildflowers. Marcus guides Ranger to a grassy area near the medical building, giving him privacy while remaining close enough to assist if needed. Despite his injuries, Ranger manages his business with dignity, further confirming his training and discipline. As they make their slow way back to the building, a distant roar echoes across the sanctuary grounds. Ranger freezes, ears forward, body tense despite his wounds. A second roar follows, then a third, the now familiar sequence that Marcus recognizes as all 3 lions calling in turn. What happens next defies explanation. Ranger, weakened by his injuries and careful in his movements just moments before, suddenly lifts his head and responds with a deep, powerful bark. He repeats the vocalization 3 times, once for each lion's call, in a pattern that mirrors the sequence of roars. "Ranger?" Marcus questions, startled by the dog's sudden strength and apparent communication. The German Shepherd turns to look at him, and Marcus is struck again by the intelligence in those amber eyes, a consciousness that seems to transcend typical animal awareness. Then, with deliberate intent, Ranger begins pulling gently in the direction of the lion enclosure, his body language unmistakable despite his injuries. "Whoa, hold up," Marcus cautions, maintaining his supportive grip under Ranger's chest. "You're in no condition for visiting hours with 3 apex predators." Ranger whines softly, his gaze fixed on the distant enclosure where the silhouettes of the 3 lions can just be made out against the morning light. The big cats have positioned themselves along the fence line, their attention focused unerringly in Ranger and Marcus's direction. The radio at Marcus's belt crackles to life. "Marcus!" comes Eleanor's voice, a note of astonishment coloring her usual professional tone. Are you outside with Ranger? Affirmative, he replies. He needed a bathroom break. We're heading back in now. The lions they all just sat down simultaneously. They were pacing agitatedly, then they all froze, looked in your direction, and sat, like they're waiting for something. Marcus looks from the radio to Ranger, whose attention remains fixed on the distant lions. Ranger barked when they roared, he reports, feeling slightly foolish yet compelled to share the observation. 3 times, matching their sequence. A long pause follows his statement. When Eleanor responds, her voice has taken on the careful neutrality she uses when confronting data that challenges her scientific understanding. Bring him back inside for now. Lisa needs to check his wounds, and I want to review the security footage from last night. Throughout the morning, Ranger receives a thorough examination from Lisa, who pronounces his recovery remarkable and ahead of schedule. The wounds show no signs of infection, and some of the smaller cuts are already beginning to heal. Ranger's vital signs are strong, his appetite returning, his alertness a positive indicator of his resilience. He's not out of the woods, Lisa. He cautions Marcus, who has remained by the German Shepherd's side. Those deeper lacerations need time, and he's lost muscle mass that will take weeks to rebuild, but he's doing better than I would have predicted. By afternoon, Eleanor returns to the medical building, her expression thoughtful as she confers with Lisa in hushed tones. Marcus catches fragments: unprecedented behavior, possible explanations, further observation needed, before Eleanor approaches him directly. The lions have settled somewhat, she informs him. They're accepting food again, though Caesar continues to bring portions to the fence line periodically. What do you think it means? Marcus asks. Eleanor's weathered face shows the careful consideration of someone who has dedicated her life to understanding wildlife. Scientifically speaking, I don't have enough data to form a conclusion. Instinctively, she hesitates. Something is happening that falls outside normal behavioral patterns. The timing with Ranger's arrival cannot be coincidental. But how would they even know about him? Marcus presses. It's not like they witnessed the rescue. A curious expression crosses Eleanor's face. Actually, they may have. Cal confirmed the lions were in the extended enclosure area yesterday morning during your patrol. The elevated rocks near where you found Ranger provide a direct line of sight. They could have observed the entire interaction. The implication hangs in the air between them. If the lions witnessed Marcus saving Ranger, could they possibly comprehend the significance of his actions? Could their strange behavior be some form of acknowledgement or response? That's anthropomorphizing, Marcus says, giving voice to the scientific objection he knows Eleanor herself would typically raise. It is, she agrees with a slight smile. And yet, their conversation is interrupted by Ranger, who has managed to sit up on his recovery bed, his attention fixed on the building's single window that faces in the direction of the lion enclosure. A soft whine escapes him, not of pain, but of what almost sounds like longing. He wants to see them, Marcus realizes aloud. Eleanor studies the German Shepherd thoughtfully. His physical condition is stable enough for short, supervised movement. Lisa confirmed that. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we follow the data where it leads us, Eleanor replies, her scientific curiosity evident beneath her professional exterior. If there's some form of communication happening between Ranger and our lions, understanding it could provide valuable insight into interspecies dynamics. The implication of her words is clear, if unorthodox. She's proposing a controlled introduction, not direct contact, but visual confirmation at least, between the injured German Shepherd and the 3 African lions. We'd use the observation deck, Eleanor continues, outlining her thinking. It overlooks the main enclosure, but maintains a safe distance. If Ranger's condition allows him to walk that far with support. Marcus looks down at the German Shepherd, who meets his gaze with that same eerie intelligence he's displayed since his rescue. Despite his scientific skepticism, Marcus can't shake the feeling that Ranger understands exactly what's being discussed. "I'll take responsibility," Marcus decides. "If you think it's safe." Eleanor nods, her decision made. "We'll go at dusk, when the lions are typically most active. Cal and Lisa will accompany us as additional safety measures." The remainder of the afternoon passes with meticulous preparation. Marcus works with Ranger on short, supported walks around the medical building, building the dog's stamina while monitoring for any signs of pain or distress. Ranger proves a model patient, neither pushing beyond his limits nor resisting necessary movement for his recovery. "You really were military trained, weren't you?" Marcus murmurs as Ranger executes a careful turn, maintaining perfect position at Marcus's left side despite his injuries. The German Shepherd glances up, and Marcus could swear there's confirmation in those intelligent eyes. By the time dusk approaches, bathing the sanctuary in golden light, Ranger has demonstrated sufficient mobility for Eleanor's proposed observation. Marcus helps him into a specialized harness that will allow for support without putting pressure on his healing wounds. The German Shepherd's anticipation is palpable, his alertness increasing as they prepare to leave the medical building. Cal and Lisa meet them outside, both carrying tranquilizer rifles as a precaution. The 4 humans and 1 dog make their way slowly along the winding path toward the lion enclosure, Ranger setting a deliberate pace that accounts for his injuries while making steady progress. The observation deck sits 20 feet above ground, level, offering an unobstructed view of the main section of the lion enclosure while maintaining a safe distance from the fence line. A sturdy wooden structure with bench seating and protective railings, it was designed for educational programs about the sanctuary's most charismatic residents. As they ascend the ramp to the deck, Ranger's demeanor shifts subtly. His ears prick forward, his posture straightens despite obvious discomfort, and his pace becomes more determined. Marcus supports him carefully, attuned to every nuance of the dog's body language after their hours together. They reach the top of the observation deck just as the sun begins to slip behind the distant mountains, painting the sanctuary in dramatic shadows and burnt orange light. From this vantage point, the lion enclosure sprawls before them, 3 acres of naturalistic habitat with rock formations, scattered trees, and a small artificial watering hole. At first, there's no sign of the lions. The enclosure appears empty, peaceful in the fading light. Then, from behind a large boulder, Caesar emerges. The male lion's massive frame and luxuriant mane are silhouetted against the sunset as he pauses, scenting the air. A moment later, Nala and Zara appear, flanking him with practiced coordination. All 3 lions stand perfectly still, their attention fixed on the observation deck. Even at this distance, their focus is unmistakable, their collective gaze homing in with predatory precision. Beside Marcus, Ranger goes completely still, his body rigid with attention. For a long moment, nothing moves. Not the humans watching with bated breath, not the injured dog standing despite his pain, not the 3 lions whose intent scrutiny defies easy explanation. Then, with deliberate dignity, Caesar lowers his massive body to the ground in what appears to be a bow. Flanking him, Nala and Zara mirror the action with synchronized grace. All 3 lions, apex predators, with no natural reason to show deference, lower their heads in what can only be described as a gesture of respect. "My God," whispers Lisa, her scientific skepticism momentarily forgotten. Ranger, with what must cost him considerable effort, returns the gesture. The injured German Shepherd dips his head in acknowledgement, his body language conveying clear recognition despite the species barrier. What they're witnessing transcends normal animal behavior. It bears the hallmarks of ritual, of communication that crosses not just species, but evolutionary divides, canine, feline, and human, momentarily united in some ancient understanding that predates domestic boundaries. In that extraordinary twilight moment, Marcus feels a shiver of recognition run through him. As a soldier, he'd witnessed the respect that warriors from vastly different cultures could share, adversaries who nonetheless acknowledged each other's courage and sacrifice. What's happening before him carries echoes of that same recognition, that same honoring of qualities that transcend ordinary divisions. The lions maintain their deferential posture for several breaths before Caesar slowly rises, turning to lead. Nala and Zara in a dignified procession toward their sheltered night quarters. They move without haste, their retreat as purposeful as their greeting had been. Did that just happen? Cal asks, no one in particular, his usual stoic demeanor shaken by what they've witnessed. Eleanor's scientific mind is already working, trying to frame explanations for behavior that defies conventional understanding. They recognized him somehow, or recognized what Marcus did for him. Either way, it's extraordinary. Lisa finishes, her voice soft with wonder. As the lions disappear into their enclosure and the last light fades from the sky, Marcus feels Ranger lean against his leg, not from weakness now, but in a gesture of companionship. Looking down at the injured German shepherd, Marcus is struck again by the intelligence in those amber eyes, the awareness that seems to transcend normal animal consciousness. "We're missing something here," Marcus says quietly. "Some connection. We don't understand yet," Eleanor nods, her scientific curiosity fully engaged, "and we're going to figure out what it is." The days that follow are filled with careful observation and meticulous documentation, as Eleanor institutes a research protocol to study the unprecedented interaction between Ranger and the sanctuary's lions. Trail cameras are positioned strategically around the lion enclosure, motion sensors installed along the perimeter, and staff assigned to regular observation shifts. The scientific part of Eleanor's mind demands data, measurable patterns that might explain what they witnessed on the observation. Marcus, meanwhile, focuses on Ranger's continued recovery. As promised, he converts a corner of his small cabin into a recovery space for the German shepherd, complete with orthopedic bedding and clear sightlines to the door and windows. A setup he instinctively knows will help a military-trained dog feel secure. Lisa provides detailed instructions for wound care, medication schedules, and physical therapy exercises to help Ranger regain his strength. "He's healing remarkably fast," Lisa comments during a checkup visit to Marcus's cabin 3. "Days after the observation deck incident, I've rarely seen this kind of recovery rate, especially with injuries this severe." Marcus watches as she gently examines the largest wound on Ranger's flank, where the barbed wire had cut deepest. The angry red of fresh injury has already faded to pink, the edges knitting together cleanly. Could it be his breeding? German shepherds are pretty resilient. Lisa's expression suggests she's considering factors beyond conventional medicine. Possibly, but there's growing research on the psychological components of physical healing. Animals with purpose, with something to live for, often recover faster than those without. "You think Ranger has a purpose?" Marcus asks, scratching gently behind the dog's ears as Lisa applies fresh bandages to the wounds that still require protection. "Don't you?" Lisa counters, her gaze moving meaningfully toward the window, beyond which the lion enclosure is just visible in the distance. That evening, as Marcus sits on his cabin's small porch watching the sunset, Ranger lies beside his chair, head resting on paws but eyes alert, fixed on the distant lion enclosure. This has become their routine, quiet companionship as day transitions to night, each lost in private thoughts, yet somehow connected in the silence. The radio on the porch table crackles to life. "Marcus, you seeing this?" Cal's voice carries, a note of barely contained excitement. Marcus picks up the radio. Negative. What am I looking for? Lion enclosure, north corner. All three of them lined up at the fence looking your way. Marcus's gaze shifts to the enclosure, where he can just make out three distinct silhouettes in the fading light. Beside him, Ranger has raised his head, ears pricked forward with intense interest. They've been doing this every sunset for the past 3 days, Cal continues. Always at the same time, always in the same spot, always looking toward your cabin. Marcus had noticed the lion's distant figures each evening, but hadn't realized the behavior was so consistent, so intentional. Now, studying them through the binoculars he keeps on the porch table, he can see the deliberate positioning. Caesar in the center, Nala and Zara flanking him, all three seated with regal posture, their attention unwavering. What do you make of it? Marcus asks, though he suspects Cal's answer will mirror his own growing intuition. Eleanor calls it ritualistic behavior. I call it them paying their respects. Cal's voice softens, like they're honoring something or someone. Marcus lowers the binoculars, looking down at Ranger, who has risen to a sitting position despite his injuries, his amber eyes fixed on the distant lions with unmistakable recognition. I'll add it to the observation log, Marcus says, his voice steady despite the strange emotion building in his chest, something between wonder and unease, between scientific fascination and primal understanding. After signing off with Cal, Marcus remains on the porch until full darkness falls and the lions retreat from their vigil. Ranger stays beside him, a warm presence against his leg, somehow both patient and expectant. What's your story, buddy? Marcus murmurs into the darkness. What connects you to them? Ranger turns to look at him, and in the ambient light from the cabin windows, those amber eyes seem to hold answers that transcend human language, wisdom born of experiences Marcus can only guess at. The following morning brings unexpected developments. Eleanor arrives at Marcus's cabin early, her expression a mixture of scientific excitement and professional concern. We've identified the barbed wire used on Ranger, she announces without preamble, accepting the coffee Marcus offers. It's a specialized type used primarily on high-security facilities, military bases, certain government installations, and ironically, some wildlife preserves. Marcus processes this information as he sits across from her at his small kitchen table, narrows down the potential sources at least. I've also had some responses to the inquiries we sent to military working dog programs within a 300-mile radius, Eleanor continues, her tone more measured now. No reports of missing German shepherds matching Ranger's description. But, Marcus prompts, sensing more to her statement. Eleanor sighs. But one program did mention having retired several dogs 6 months ago due to budget cuts. No specifics on individual animals, just confirmation that they would have been around. Ranger's age and training level. Retired how? Marcus asks, though the tightness in his chest suggests he already suspects the answer. They wouldn't specify, just that the dogs were processed out of the program. Eleanor's distaste for the euphemism is evident in her expression. In some cases, that can mean euthanasia for dogs not deemed suitable for adoption. The implication hangs heavy in the air between them. Military working dogs form intense bonds with their handlers, their training creating a sense of purpose, integral to their identity. To be abruptly processed out would constitute a profound betrayal for an animal whose entire existence had been defined by service and loyalty. From his bed in the corner, Ranger watches them with those knowing eyes, his ears shifting slightly, to track their conversation. You think someone rescued him from being put down? Marcus asks. Then why the barbed wire? Why leave him to die on our property? Eleanor shakes her head. I don't have those answers yet, but there's something else. She pulls a tablet from her bag, tapping the screen to bring up an image. This was captured by one of the trail cameras at 3:14 this morning. The night vision photo shows Caesar at the fence line closest to Marcus's cabin. The male lion stands, with something in his mouth, what appears to be a large branch or piece of wood. He brought it to the fence and left it there, Eleanor explains, swiping to show a sequence of images. Later, Nala brought what looks like a rabbit she'd caught during night hunting. She left it beside Caesar's offering. Then Zara brought this. The final image shows what appears to be a clump of tall grasses or reeds, carefully arranged beside the other items. Gifts? Marcus suggests, struggling to interpret the behavior. Offerings, perhaps, Eleanor corrects gently. Cal collected them this morning. The branch Caesar brought is oak, not native to our immediate area. He must have carried it at least half a mile from the eastern section of their enclosure. The rabbit was freshly killed, but untouched, which contradicts basic predatory instincts. And the grasses Zara gathered are a specific type used by big cats in the wild to self-medicate digestive issues. Marcus tries to process the implications. They're bringing medicines, healing items. Eleanor's scientific detachment momentarily gives way to wonder. They're bringing things they value, things they believe have power. Whether it's sympathetic, magic, or primitive medicine, or something else entirely, they're clearly attempting to contribute to Ranger's recovery. As if aware he's the subject of their conversation, Ranger rises from his bed and approaches, moving with increasing ease as his wounds continue to heal. He sits beside Marcus, leaning slightly against his leg, in a gesture that has become familiar over the past days, not seeking support now, but offering it. There's more, Eleanor says, watching their interaction with thoughtful eyes. Caesar was filmed making a distinctive vocalization before leaving his offering. Our sound technician is analyzing it, but preliminary assessment suggests it's not a typical territorial call or hunting vocalization. What does that mean? It means they're communicating in ways we haven't documented before. Eleanor's scientific curiosity is clearly engaged, but there's something else in her expression, a human wonder at mysteries that science alone might not fully explain. Marcus scratches behind Ranger's ears absently, his mind working through possibilities. Could Ranger have some history with these specific lions? Maybe they were housed together somewhere, part of the same facility. That's one theory we're exploring, Eleanor acknowledges. The origins of our lions aren't fully documented. They came to us after being confiscated from an illegal exotic animal collector 10 years ago. Before that, she shrugs. Records are spotty at best. And Ranger is what, 6 or 7 years old based on Lisa's assessment? The timelines could overlap. They could, Eleanor agrees. But even if they shared space somewhere, it wouldn't fully explain the behavior we're seeing. Lions don't typically form social bonds with other species, certainly not lasting ones. A comfortable silence falls as they both contemplate the strange connections forming around them. Ranger rests his head on Marcus's knee, those knowing amber eyes moving between the two humans as if following their conversation. There's one more thing, Eleanor finally says, her tone shifting to something more cautious. Cal found fresh tracks. This morning, just outside our northern perimeter, human footprints matching the boot patterns we found near where Ranger was abandoned. Marcus feels a cold certainty settle in his chest. Someone's watching the sanctuary. It appears so. I've increased security patrols and checked all fence lines. No breaches detected yet, but Eleanor doesn't need to finish the thought. Whoever left Ranger to die might return to check on their handiwork or worse, attempt to finish what they started. I'll adjust my patrol routes, Marcus decides, military training automatically shifting to threat assessment. Cover the northern boundary more frequently. Not alone, Eleanor cautions, and definitely not with Ranger. If whoever did this sees him alive and recovering, they might try again. Marcus finishes grimly. Ranger lifts his head at Marcus's. Tone, a low rumble building in his chest. Not quite a growl, but a sound of alertness, of readiness despite his injuries. The German shepherd's posture shifts subtly, protective rather than protected, his body angling between Marcus and the door. He understands more than we realize, Eleanor observes quietly. He was trained to, Marcus responds, though he suspects. Ranger's comprehension extends beyond even sophisticated military training. In their days together, the German shepherd has displayed an intuitive understanding that borders on the uncanny, anticipating Marcus's moods, responding to unspoken cues, seeming to grasp nuances of human conversation that should be beyond canine comprehension. Eleanor rises to leave, her scientific mind clearly still processing the accumulating anomalies. Keep the radio close. Security staff are on high alert, and Lisa wants to check Ranger's bandages again this evening. After she departs, Marcus finds himself restless, the potential threat adding a familiar tension to his muscles, the hypervigilance of combat returning unbidden. He moves to the cabin's small window, scanning the tree line with practiced precision, looking for any sign of movement or disturbance. Ranger joins him, standing steady at his side, no longer needing physical support. The German shepherd's recovery continues to outpace normal expectations, his strength returning with each passing day. Looking down at the dog, Marcus feels a sudden, powerful certainty. Whatever connection exists between Ranger and the lions, whatever strange history they might share, their paths have converged around something meaningful, something that transcends ordinary explanation. In the distance, a lion's roar breaks the morning quiet, Caesar's distinctive voice, followed by Nala's, then Zara's. The familiar sequence carries across the sanctuary grounds, clear and intentional. Beside him, Ranger raises his head and responds with 3 measured barks, an acknowledgement, a communication, a promise. What are you telling them? Marcus wonders. Aloud, Ranger looks up at him with those intelligent eyes, and Marcus could swear there's determination there, purpose that extends beyond recovery, beyond mere survival. Whatever brought Ranger to Whispering Pines, whatever cruel intent lay behind his abandonment, the German shepherd has found something here worth fighting for, a connection that spans species boundaries and defies easy explanation. As the morning sun climbs higher, casting long shadows through the trees surrounding his cabin, Marcus makes a silent promise of his own. Whatever comes next, whatever threat might be watching from the shadows, he will protect this extraordinary animal that fate has placed in his care, and by extension, the mysterious bond forming between Ranger and the sanctuary's lions. A week passes, marked by Ranger's accelerating recovery and increasingly structured observations of the lion's unusual behavior. Eleanor establishes a formal research protocol, bringing in a wildlife behaviorist from a nearby university to help document and analyze the emerging patterns. The expert, Dr. Amara Chen, arrives with scientific skepticism that quickly gives way to professional fascination as she witnesses the lion's deliberate, coordinated actions. I've studied lion behavior for 15 years across 3 continents, Dr. Chen tells Marcus, as they observe Caesar's methodical patrol of the fence line one afternoon. I've never seen anything like this level of focused attention on another species, especially sustained over multiple days. The lions have developed a predictable routine, dawn and dusk vigils facing Marcus's cabin, periodic offerings left at the fence line, and coordinated vocalizations that consistently elicit responses from Ranger. The German shepherd, for his part, has graduated from wound recovery to what Lisa terms rehabilitative exercise, steadily rebuilding muscle and stamina under Marcus's watchful supervision. He's at about 70% capacity, Lisa estimates, During a checkup on the cabin porch, watching as Ranger completes a careful circuit of the small clearing surrounding Marcus's home. The deeper wounds are fully closed, though the scarring will remain visible. Another week, and he could handle light duty if he were still in service. The mention of service prompts Marcus to share his ongoing research into Ranger's possible background. "I've been reaching out to contacts from my military days," he explains, scratching behind Ranger's ears as the German Shepherd settles beside his chair. "No solid leads yet, but there's talk of a specialized canine program that was shut down about 8 months ago. Highly classified, minimal paper trail." Lisa's expression darkens. "The kind of program where dogs might be processed out without public accountability." Exactly. Marcus doesn't elaborate further, but his jaw tightens at the thought. Military. Working dogs dedicate their lives to protecting their human counterparts, often at tremendous personal risk. The idea that those same dogs might be discarded when no longer convenient runs counter to everything Marcus believes about honor and loyalty. Later that afternoon, as Marcus conducts maintenance checks on the sanctuary's north perimeter fence, Ranger accompanies him, moving with increasing confidence over the uneven terrain. The German Shepherd stays close, occasionally ranging ahead to investigate interesting scents, but always returning promptly when called. His training is evident in every movement, every response, a disciplined mind in a body still recovering from trauma. They're checking a section of fence near where Ranger was originally found when the German Shepherd suddenly freezes, ears forward, body rigid with alert tension. A low growl builds in his chest, the first aggressive sound Marcus has heard from him since the rescue. Marcus immediately drops to a crouch, scanning the surrounding forest with the heightened awareness that combat experience engraved into his nervous system. "What is it, boy?" he whispers, one hand resting reassuringly on Ranger's shoulder. The dog's focus is unwavering, fixed on a dense thicket about 50 yards beyond the fence line. His growl deepens, the sound vibrating through his healing body with surprising power. Marcus reaches slowly for the radio at his belt, keeping his movements subtle. "Cal, this is Marcus. Possible situation at North Perimeter, Section 3. Rangers alerting to something in the woods just beyond our property. Going to investigate from our side of the fence." "Copy that," comes Cal's immediate response. "Back up. Headed your way. ETA 4 minutes. "Stay close," Marcus murmurs to Ranger as they begin moving cautiously along the fence line, seeking a better angle to observe whatever has triggered the dog's response. From this position, partially concealed by a large pine, Marcus can just make out what appears to be the corner of a camouflage tarp stretched between trees in the thicket, a makeshift blind or observation post. Someone has been watching the sanctuary, possibly for days. Before Marcus can relay this information, Ranger's growl shifts to a series of sharp, authoritative barks, a clear warning rather than mere alert. The sudden noise has immediate effect. Movement erupts from the hidden blind. A figure in dark clothing breaks cover, sprinting away from the fence line and deeper into the forest. "Contact," Marcus reports tersely into the radio. "One individual, moving northwest through the woods. Camouflage blind, established approximately 50 yards beyond North Fence, Section 3. Security team responding." Eleanor's voice breaks in. "Do not pursue beyond the property line, Marcus. I repeat, do not pursue." The directive is clear and sensible. Marcus has no legal authority beyond the sanctuary boundaries, and pursuing an unknown subject into rough terrain would be tactically unsound. But Ranger clearly has other ideas. The German Shepherd paces anxiously along the fence, his barking intensifying as the fleeing figure disappears among the trees. "Easy, Ranger," Marcus soothes, though he understands the dog's frustration. Military. Working dogs are trained to pursue threats, to apprehend those who run. Standing down goes against Ranger's fundamental programming. The sanctuary's security team arrives minutes later, two former park rangers Eleanor hired specifically for their wilderness expertise and tracking skills. After a brief conference, they follow the fence line to the nearest gate, intending to document the observation blind and search for any evidence the watcher might have left behind. "You and Ranger should head back to the main compound," suggests Jim Holloway, the security team's senior member. "If whoever was watching knows where he was found, they might associate him with you specifically. The logic is sound, but something about retreating doesn't sit right with Marcus. His military instincts push against leaving a potential threat unaddressed, and Ranger's continued alertness suggests the dog shares his concern." "We'll take the long route back," Marcus compromises. "Circle through the southeastern quadrant. Approach the compound from a different direction than expected." Holloway nods, understanding the tactic. "We'll maintain radio contact, check in every 10 minutes. As Marcus and Ranger begin their circuitous return journey, skirting the lion enclosure's outer perimeter, an uneasy feeling settles between Marcus's shoulder blades. The familiar sensation from combat patrols when unseen eyes tracked his movement. Ranger clearly shares his discomfort, staying closer than usual, his head swiveling to check their surroundings with military precision. They're passing the section of the lion enclosure furthest from public areas when Ranger suddenly stops, head lifting as if catching a scent on the breeze. Before Marcus can question the behavior, a distinctive sound breaks the forest quiet, the sequence of 3 roars that has become familiar over the past week. What happens next defies explanation. Ranger barks once, sharply, then breaks into a run, not away from the lion enclosure, but directly toward it, moving faster than Marcus has seen since his rescue. Despite his still healing body, the German Shepherd covers ground with powerful strides, purpose driving every movement. "Ranger, halt!" Marcus calls, employing the formal command tone that military dogs are trained to obey instantly. To his shock, Ranger hesitates only briefly before continuing his determined course toward the enclosure. Marcus follows at a run, concern overriding his surprise at the uncharacteristic disobedience. The southeastern section of the lion habitat features a natural incline, where visitors can sometimes observe the animals from above, with the actual fence line dipping into a shallow ravine, a design that creates the illusion of unobstructed views while maintaining proper safety barriers. Ranger reaches this overlook and stops, body vibrating with tension as he stares down into the enclosure. When Marcus catches up, breathing hard from the unexpected sprint, the sight below freezes, him in place. All 3 lions are gathered at the bottom of the ravine, but they're not alone. A dark-clothed figure crouches inside the enclosure, partially concealed by undergrowth, but clearly visible to the increasingly agitated lions. Caesar paces a tight circle around the intruder, powerful muscles bunched with predatory intent, while Nala and Zara maintain positions that effectively block potential escape routes. "How the hell did they get in there?" Marcus breathes, reaching for his radio. Before he can call for backup, the situation deteriorates rapidly. The intruder rises suddenly, brandishing what appears to be a tranquilizer rifle, swinging it towards Caesar with clear intent. Marcus doesn't hesitate. "Security breach at lion enclosure southeast quadrant," he barks into the radio. "Armed intruder. Inside the habitat, lions threatened." All available personnel respond immediately. Even as he issues the alert, Marcus knows help will come too late. The lion's agitation is escalating, Caesar's growl audible even at this distance. Any sudden movement from the intruder could trigger a full predatory response, and if the big cat is shot with a tranquilizer, the other lions will almost certainly attack while their leader is vulnerable. Ranger seems to understand the gravity of the situation. The German Shepherd looks up at Marcus with an intensity that transcends ordinary animal communication, a clear request for permission, for trust. "What are you thinking, boy?" Marcus murmurs, recognizing the focused determination in those amber eyes, the same expression he'd seen in the finest military working dogs before critical operations. Ranger barks once, sharply, then turns back to the scene below. The lions have heard him. All three massive heads swivel toward the overlook, momentarily distracted from the intruder. In that brief window of divided attention, Ranger makes his decision. Before Marcus can react, the German shepherd charges down the slope toward the ravine, his powerful bark echoing across the enclosure. The sound draws the immediate attention of both the lions and the intruder, creating a crucial moment of confusion. "Ranger, no!" Marcus calls, but it's too late. The dog has committed to whatever plan his remarkable intelligence has formulated. What follows seems to unfold in slow motion. Ranger reaches the outer fence, which stands approximately 6 feet high at this section. Without hesitation, the German shepherd gathers himself and leaps, clearing the barrier in a display of athletic power that belies his recent injuries. He lands inside the buffer zone, the 12-foot space between the outer fence and the actual habitat containment fence, and continues his charge without breaking stride. The intruder swings the tranquilizer rifle toward this new threat, momentarily forgetting the lions. It's a fatal mistake. Caesar lunges forward with explosive power, covering the distance to the human in a heartbeat. The rifle discharges harmlessly into the ground as the lion's massive paw strikes, sending the weapon flying. Marcus watches in horror, certain he's about to witness a gruesome death, if not from Caesar's initial strike, then surely from the coordinated attack that Nala and Zara are poised to deliver. But what happens instead defies all natural predatory behavior. Caesar stops short of delivering a killing bite. The massive lion stands over the fallen intruder, a paw firmly planted on the human's chest, teeth bared in warning rather than attack. Nala and Zara maintain their positions, effectively surrounding the threat, but making no move to close in. Ranger, meanwhile, paces along the buffer zone fence, barking sharply, not in alarm, but in what sounds strangely like command. The lions respond to these vocalizations, Caesar adjusting his position to pin the intruder more securely without inflicting serious injury. The females moving with precise coordination to block any potential escape route. By the time security personnel arrive minutes later, a bizarre tableau has formed. One human intruder immobilized by Caesar's strategic restraint, 2 lionesses standing guard with unexpected discipline, and 1 German shepherd orchestrating the entire operation from the buffer zone. An impromptu interspecies security team performing with coordinated efficiency that defies conventional understanding. "Stand down, Ranger!" Marcus calls when backup arrives, using the formal command language of military canine units. To everyone's amazement, Ranger obeys instantly, and the lions follow suit, Caesar releasing pressure on the intruder's chest and backing away, Nala and Zara retreating to a watchful distance. As sanctuary staff secure the outer perimeter and prepare to safely extract both the intruder and Ranger from their respective positions, Marcus stands at the overlook, watching the scene with a mixture of awe and dawning comprehension. Whatever Ranger's history, whatever connection he shares with these lions, it goes far beyond coincidence or simple interspecies curiosity. He's witnessing something extraordinary, something that challenges fundamental assumptions about animal intelligence, communication, and relationship. And at the center of it all stands an injured German shepherd who, despite everything humans have done to him, still chooses to protect rather than destroy. The aftermath of the intruder incident unfolds with military precision. Sanctuary security, working with local law enforcement, safely extracts the trespasser, a man in his mid-30s whose camouflage clothing bears no identifying insignia, but whose tactical gear suggests professional training. He remains silent, during arrest, refusing to provide identification or explanation for his presence inside the lion enclosure. Meanwhile, retrieving Ranger from the buffer zone presents its own challenges. The German Shepherd shows no fear of the lions, who have retreated to a watchful distance, but remain clearly engaged with the dog's presence. When Eleanor suggests tranquilizing Ranger for safe extraction, Marcus intervenes. "Let me try something." "First," he requests, approaching the outer fence where Ranger paces with alert purpose. "Ranger front and center," Marcus calls, using the formal command structure of military canine units. Without hesitation, Ranger responds, positioning himself directly opposite Marcus at the fence line, body aligned with perfect military discipline despite his recent injury. The lions observe this interaction with evident interest, Caesar's massive head tilted slightly as if evaluating the exchange. "Exit strategy alpha," Marcus continues, inventing a command but delivering it with confident authority. He gestures toward the service gate at the far end of the buffer zone, a maintenance access point that staff could open remotely from the security booth. To everyone's amazement, Ranger seems to understand. The German Shepherd trots purposefully toward the indicated gate, stopping precisely at the threshold and sitting at attention. Even more remarkably, the lions make no move to approach, maintaining their distance as if respecting some unspoken boundary. "He's asking permission to leave," Dr. Chen observes with quiet astonishment. "And they're granting it." When sanctuary staff activate the service gate, Ranger exits the buffer zone with dignified efficiency, immediately returning to Marcus's side as if completing a routine training exercise rather than an unprecedented interspecies security operation. Later that evening, as county deputies process the silent intruder and sanctuary staff work to verify the integrity of all enclosures, Marcus sits with Eleanor, Lisa, and Dr. Chen in the main office, attempting to make sense of the day's extraordinary events. The coordination was deliberate, Dr. Chen insists, reviewing footage captured by security cameras. Caesar physically restrained the intruder without inflicting serious injury, behavior that contradicts natural predatory instincts. The lionesses established a perimeter with tactical precision, and Ranger, she pauses, searching for scientific language adequate to describe what they witnessed. Ranger directed the entire operation with vocalizations that the lions clearly understood and responded to, like he was their handler, Marcus suggests quietly, the implications sending a chill through him despite the office's warmth. Eleanor, ever the pragmatic scientist, attempts to ground the conversation in observable facts. "We know a few things with certainty. First, someone deliberately left Ranger to die on sanctuary property. Second, they've been monitoring the sanctuary since then, possibly looking for confirmation of his death. Third, today's intruder carried a tranquilizer rifle into a secure habitat, suggesting intent to immobilize at least one lion. Poaching, Lisa suggests, though her tone indicates skepticism. Possible, but the risk profile doesn't match typical poaching operations, Marcus counters, military assessment instincts engaged. Breaking into a monitored sanctuary in broad daylight, targeting captive animals with established human connections, it's high risk for limited payoff. Unless the lions themselves weren't the primary target, Dr. Chen suggests carefully. What if this was about Ranger? What if someone needed to ensure his elimination specifically because of his connection to the lions? The theory hangs in the air, simultaneously outlandish and disturbingly plausible given what they've witnessed. Marcus thinks of Ranger, now resting in a secure section of the medical building under staff observation. The German Shepherd had shown no signs of stress after the incident, his demeanor calm and focused, as if executing a mission rather than surviving a potentially deadly encounter. The intruder had military-grade equipment, Marcus notes. His movements showed tactical training, and he's maintaining silence despite significant legal consequences. That suggests professional discipline, possibly contractual obligation. You think this connects to Ranger's former program? Eleanor asks, connecting the dots Marcus has been laying out. I think it might. Marcus hesitates, then shares information he'd received that morning through his military contacts. A source confirmed. There was a classified program codenamed Cerberus that combined specialized canine units with, he pauses, aware of how the next words will sound, with limited exposure to large predator species, including big cats. Exposure for what purpose? Lisa asks, professional concern evident in her voice. Officially, to develop advanced predator detection and avoidance capabilities for deployment in regions with dangerous wildlife. Marcus's expression suggests he doubts this cover story. Unofficially, there were rumors of more extensive interspecies communication experiments. Nothing confirmed, nothing on paper, just whispers among handlers. Eleanor processes this with scientific skepticism tempered by the evidence of her own observations. You're suggesting Ranger was part of a classified program that somehow trained dogs to, what? Communicate with big cats, command them in tactical situations? It sounds impossible, Marcus acknowledges. Or it did, until we witnessed a German shepherd coordinate with 3 African lions to neutralize a threat without bloodshed. The implications expand beyond their immediate situation, touching on fundamental questions about animal intelligence, interspecies communication, and the ethical boundaries of military research. If such a program existed, if humans had deliberately cultivated communication channels between canine and feline predators for tactical purposes, the scientific and military applications would be extraordinary. The lion behavior alone defies conventional understanding. Dr. Chen notes, returning to the sanctuary footage. Look at their positioning. Perfect triangulation, maintaining lines of sight, preserving escape routes while minimizing the subject's options. That's not instinctive predation, that's coordinated containment strategy. And Ranger, Lisa adds, his vocalizations were specific. Different tones, patterns, cadences for different instructions. And the lions responded with near-perfect comprehension. Marcus recalls his years working alongside military canine units, the deep bonds that formed between handlers and dogs, the seemingly intuitive communication that developed over time. He'd witnessed remarkable examples of canine intelligence, but nothing approaching what Ranger demonstrated today, a level of cross-species command that bordered on the fantastical. If such a program existed, Eleanor reasons, following the hypothesis to its logical conclusion, and if it was terminated, what would happen to the animals involved, especially if the research was classified? The question brings them full circle to Ranger's condition when Marcus found him, deliberately bound in barbed wire, left to die on sanctuary property where the lions would detect his scent. Not random cruelty, but calculated elimination of evidence. They couldn't risk him being found and identified, Marcus concludes grimly. A military-trained dog with unprecedented abilities, potentially connecting to classified research. He'd raised too many questions. But why here? Lisa wonders. Why leave him at a wildlife sanctuary specifically? Dr. Chen's expression suggests a disturbing theory forming. The lions, your 3 lions were confiscated from an illegal collector 10 years ago, correct? With minimal documentation of their origins? Eleanor nods slowly, the implications becoming clear. You think our lions were part of the same program? It would explain the immediate recognition, the established communication patterns, the coordinated response to threat. Dr. Chen's scientific caution gives way to the weight of observed evidence. These animals know each other. They've worked together before. The theory crystallizes. Whispering Pine's 3 lions, assumed to be simply victims of exotic animal trafficking, might actually Three former research subjects, separated from their canine counterparts when the program was terminated, their unusual abilities hidden beneath the appearance of ordinary captive big cats. Until Ranger's arrival, awakened remembered connections, dormant but not destroyed. Office falls silent as each processes the extraordinary implications. If true, the sanctuary has unwittingly become home to living evidence of classified military research. Animals whose capabilities challenge scientific understanding and whose existence poses uncomfortable questions about human exploitation of interspecies relationships. The intruder today wasn't trying to poach lions, Marcus concludes, the tactical picture clarifying in his mind. He was sent to eliminate evidence, both Ranger and potentially the lions themselves, if their unusual behavior had been noticed. Which means they'll try again, Eleanor states, the practical implications overtaking scientific wonder. If this connects to a classified program, they can't risk exposure. The sanctuary's security protocols, designed to protect animals from conventional threats like poachers or vandals, suddenly seem inadequate against the possibility of trained operatives with military backing. The safety of everyone, human and animal, requires immediate reconsideration. We need to contact federal authorities, Lisa suggests. With what evidence? Marcus counters. Unusual animal behavior, a trespasser who isn't talking, unsubstantiated rumors about a classified program that officially doesn't exist. We'd be dismissed as conspiracy theorists, or worse, draw unwanted attention before we have proper protection in place. Eleanor, ever the pragmatist, makes the decision. We secure what we have, increase patrols, enhance surveillance, limit access to essential personnel only, document everything, every interaction between Ranger and the lions, every unusual behavior pattern, every security anomaly. Build an evidence base too substantial to ignore. As the meeting concludes with assignment of specific security enhancements, Marcus finds himself drawn back to the medical building where Ranger rests under observation. The German Shepherd lies alert but calm on his bed, head lifting at Marcus's approach, those intelligent amber eyes tracking his movements with awareness that seems to transcend normal animal cognition. "You've been holding out on me, buddy," Marcus says softly, settling beside the dog. "All this time, I thought I was helping you heal. Turns out you're something entirely beyond my understanding." Ranger shifts closer, resting his head on Marcus's leg in a gesture that has become familiar, seeking connection, offering companionship. Despite the extraordinary revelations of the day, this simple moment of trust between wounded souls remains unchanged. Perhaps the only certainty in an increasingly complex situation. Through the building's window, the lion enclosure is visible. In the distance, illuminated by security floodlights that cast long shadows across the habitat. Even at this hour, all three lions remain unusually active. Caesar patrolling the perimeter with focused purpose, while Nala and Zara maintain watchful positions on elevated rocks, a security formation that mirrors military protocols with uncanny precision. "What did they do to you?" Marcus whispers, the question directed as much to the distant lions as to the dog beside him. "What were you trained to become?" Ranger offers no answer beyond the steady warmth of his presence, but his gaze follows. Marcus is toward the lion enclosure, a silent acknowledgement of connections that transcend species boundaries, of shared experiences that have created something unprecedented in the natural world. Whatever Ranger and the lions represent, whether miracle of evolution or product of human intervention, their protection has become Marcus's mission, drawing on every skill his military career instilled. Somewhere beyond the sanctuary's boundaries, powerful interests seek to eliminate evidence of extraordinary capabilities. Within those boundaries, an unlikely alliance of humans and animals prepares to protect discoveries that could transform understanding of interspecies relationships forever. As night deepens over Whispering Pines, a new understanding forms in Marcus's mind, a recognition that the wounded German shepherd he rescued has, in his own way, initiated a rescue in return. By revealing capabilities beyond conventional understanding, Ranger has drawn Marcus into a mission with purpose and meaning that transcends his own wounds, both physical and psychological. For a veteran seeking redemption through service, it is a gift beyond measure. Dawn breaks over Whispering Pines with a tense new reality. The sanctuary transforms overnight from wildlife rehabilitation center to fortified compound. Eleanor implements enhanced security protocols with the efficiency of someone who understands that lives, both human and animal, depend on proper preparation. Staff receive emergency briefings, access points are limited and monitored, and the county sheriff's department increases patrol frequency on roads surrounding the property. Marcus oversees much of this transition, his military experience, providing valuable perspective on vulnerability assessments and defensive positioning. Yet even as he works to secure the physical space, his thoughts continually return to the extraordinary capabilities Ranger demonstrated and the implications of a classified program that might have created such abilities. "We need to understand what we're actually dealing with," he tells Eleanor as they review security camera positioning near the lion enclosure. "Not just protect against external threats, but comprehend what Ranger and the lions can actually do, the full extent of their communication and coordination." Eleanor nods, her scientific mind already formulating research protocols. Dr. Chen is developing an observation framework, controlled scenarios to document their interactions systematically. If these abilities are real, we need empirical evidence. "When do we start?" Marcus asks, watching as Ranger paces alongside the fence, separating the main compound from the lion habitat. The German shepherd has been unusually restless since morning, his attention fixed on the enclosure where Caesar, Nala, and Zara have maintained their own vigilant patrol pattern along the perimeter. This afternoon, Eleanor decides, Chen wants daylight conditions for optimal video documentation. We'll use the observation platform near the eastern section. Controlled environment, clear sight lines, multiple camera angles. The eastern observation platform, a recently constructed viewing area designed for educational programs, offers an ideal setting for scientific documentation. Elevated 20 feet above ground level, it provides unobstructed views of the lion habitat while maintaining appropriate safety barriers. By early afternoon, Dr. Chen has transformed the space into a mobile research station, complete with high-definition cameras, directional microphones, and biometric sensors to track Ranger's physiological responses during interaction. The study design is simple, Chen explains as Marcus arrives with Ranger. Progressive proximity stages with standardized documentation at each phase. First, visual contact only. Then, vocalization exchanges. Finally, if safety parameters remain stable, limited protected contact through the buffer fence. Ranger seems to understand the significance of the moment. The German shepherd carries himself with focused alertness, his previous restlessness replaced by the calm readiness Marcus recognizes from military working dogs before important operations. Whatever abilities Ranger possesses, whatever training shaped his extraordinary mind, the dog clearly comprehends that today's interactions will be observed and evaluated. He knows this is a test, Lisa observes quietly as she checks Ranger's vitals one final time before the session begins. Look at his body language. He's preparing to demonstrate something. The observation begins with careful documentation of baseline behaviors, The lions, initially engaged in typical afternoon activities scattered across their habitat, show immediate alertness when Ranger appears on the platform. All three big cats orient toward the German Shepherd with synchronized attention, abandoning previous interests without hesitation. Immediate recognition at approximately 70 yards, Dr. Chen narrates for the recording. Subject animals display coordinated attention shift without vocalization trigger. What follows over the next 2 hours defies conventional understanding of animal behavior and communication. In response to specific hand signals from Marcus, signals he improvises without prior establishment, Ranger produces a complex series of vocalizations that vary in pitch, duration, and pattern. The lions respond to these canine communications with precise movements and positioning, creating formations that Dr. Chen identifies as having distinct tactical functions. Triangle containment formation, she notes, as the lions arrange themselves in a perfect equilateral pattern around a designated target area. Diamond surveillance pattern, linear barrier configuration, rotating sentinel formation. Each pattern emerges in direct response to Ranger's specific vocalization sequences, with no visible trial and error, only fluid, coordinated execution that suggests established protocols and shared understanding. Throughout the demonstration, Ranger maintains unwavering focus, his amber eyes moving between Marcus and the lions as if translating between species. This isn't instinctive behavior, Eleanor states, scientific caution giving way to amazement. This is trained response to established commands, a communication system deliberately developed and implemented across species boundaries. The most extraordinary moment comes during the final phase of observation. With Marcus's permission, Dr. Chen introduces a controlled stimulus, a wildlife rehabilitation mannequin placed within the lion habitat by sanctuary staff earlier that morning. The life-sized model designed for training new handlers in safe, animal transport techniques provides a simulacrum of a potential target without actual risk. Ranger, Marcus says simply, pointing toward the mannequin partially visible behind a rock formation. Secure. Without additional instruction, Ranger produces a complex series of barks, growls, and higher-pitched vocalizations that last approximately 12 seconds. The response is immediate and astonishing. Caesar approaches the mannequin directly while Nala and Zara execute a perfect flanking maneuver, all three lions converging on the target with coordinated precision that would impress military tacticians. Rather than attacking the mannequin, however, they establish a containment formation, Caesar positioning himself directly before the figure, Nala and Zara completing a triangulation that leaves the target immobilized but unharmed. They maintain this position, perfectly still, despite natural predatory instincts that would typically encourage movement, until Ranger issues another vocalization sequence. Only then do the lions release their position, returning to normal patrol patterns as if completing a training exercise. "My God," whispers Lisa, who has observed the entire sequence with increasing astonishment. They're a tactical unit. The implications expand in the silence that follows this demonstration. Whatever program created these capabilities wasn't developing simple communication or training techniques. It was establishing interspecies combat teams with coordinated field operations capacity. The military applications would be extraordinary. Canine handlers directing lion assets for containment, intimidation, or potentially lethal force, all through proxy command structures that would leave no human fingerprints on the operation. "This changes everything," Eleanor says finally, her voice steady despite the enormity of what they've witnessed. "We're not just protecting animals from external threats, we're safeguarding evidence of capabilities that could transform our understanding of interspecies communication or become weaponized in ways we can barely imagine." As the observation session concludes and staff begin processing the extensive documentation, Marcus remains on the platform with Ranger, watching the lions return to more typical behaviors in the afternoon light. The German Shepherd sits beside him, alert but relaxed, seemingly satisfied with his performance. "You did good, buddy," Marcus tells him, scratching behind Ranger's ears in the way he's come to enjoy. "Though I'm still trying to wrap my head around exactly what it is you did." Ranger looks up at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Marcus could swear there's understanding there, perhaps even amusement at human limitations in comprehending capabilities that transcend conventional boundaries. The peace of this moment is shattered by the sharp crack of Eleanor's radio. "Security alert at North Perimeter," comes the tense voice of Jim Holloway. "Multiple heat signatures detected approaching the property line. At least 4 individuals moving with tactical spacing." Marcus is immediately on alert, military instincts, engaging as he reaches for his own radio. Position and direction. Grid coordinates N7, moving south-southeast toward the maintenance access road. They'll reach the outer fence in approximately 8 minutes at current pace. Eleanor joins the channel, her voice calm but urgent. "Implement security protocol, Echo. All non-essential personnel to secure locations. Notify County Sheriff immediately." As Marcus prepares to join the security response, he notices Ranger's demeanor has shifted dramatically. The German Shepherd stands rigid with attention, eyes fixed on the northern horizon where the approaching threat remains invisible but clearly sensed. A low growl builds in his chest, not the alert vocalization from his demonstration, but something more primal, more dangerous. "You're staying here," Marcus tells him firmly, recognizing the dog's instinct to engage. "You're still recovering." Ranger's response is a sharp bark of what can only be described as disagreement, followed by a meaningful glance toward the lion enclosure, where all 3 big cats have assumed alert postures along the perimeter fence, their attention also fixed northward despite having no direct visual line to the approaching intruders. The realization hits Marcus with sudden clarity. Ranger and the lions aren't merely sensing danger, they're communicating about it. Somehow, across the physical separation of fences and distance, a tactical assessment is being shared between species with efficiency that human security systems might envy. "They know," Marcus says aloud, the implications shifting his understanding of their defensive capabilities. They're already coordinating. Dr. Chen, reviewing her monitoring equipment, confirms this observation with professional astonishment. The lion's positioning shifted precisely 12 seconds after Ranger's initial alert posture, despite no direct line of sight. They're receiving and acting on his communication in real time. The tactical implications are significant. Whatever, whoever, is approaching the sanctuary isn't facing standard security measures and untrained animals. They're potentially encountering an integrated defense system that includes 3 apex predators with military-grade tactical training and interspecies communication capabilities. "We need to rethink our response strategy," Marcus decides, the soldier in him recognizing an unexpected asset when he sees one. "If Ranger and the lions can coordinate their awareness, we should incorporate that capability into our security positioning." Eleanor hesitates, scientific caution warring with practical necessity. "You're suggesting we actively utilize their abilities rather than just document them." "I'm suggesting we acknowledge what's already happening," Marcus counters. "They're forming a defensive perimeter without our instruction. We can either work with that reality or ignore a significant tactical advantage." The decision isn't made lightly. Deliberately employing animals in security operations raises ethical questions that Eleanor's scientific mind cannot easily dismiss. Yet the immediate threat demands pragmatic response, especially when the animals themselves seem already committed to defensive engagement. "Limited coordination only," she finally agrees. Observation and alert functions, not direct engagement. Under no circumstances are the lions to be released from their secure enclosure, regardless of the threat level. With these parameters established, Marcus adapts the security response plan, positioning human personnel to complement rather than duplicate the surveillance coverage Ranger and the lions have already established. The approaching intruders, whoever they are, will encounter a defensive setup informed by awareness they cannot possibly anticipate. As twilight deepens over the sanctuary and the heat signatures draw steadily closer, Marcus finds himself in the unique position of incorporating an interspecies intelligence network into tactical planning. Ranger remains at his side, a constant source of updated information through subtle changes in posture and periodic vocalizations directed toward the lion enclosure, where the three big cats maintain coordinated positioning along the perimeter that mirrors security team placements. They're not just animals responding to a potential threat, Dr. Chen observes, continuing to document the remarkable behavior even as she prepares to retreat to a secure location. They're a functional unit, with specialized roles and coordinated awareness. The approaching darkness brings with it an unsettling certainty. Whatever happens in the coming hours will forever change Whispering Pines, wildlife sanctuary. Either they will successfully defend not just the facility, but the extraordinary secret it now harbors, or they will lose something irreplaceable, living evidence of capabilities that challenge fundamental assumptions about the boundaries between human and animal intelligence. As the first security sensors trigger silent alarms, indicating perimeter breach imminent, Marcus checks his equipment one final time, confirms communication channels with all security personnel, and looks down at Ranger, whose focused alertness has not wavered. "Ready, buddy?" he asks quietly. Ranger's response is a soft whine of affirmation, followed by a measured bark that carries across the darkening sanctuary grounds. From the lion enclosure comes an answering call, Caesar's distinctive roar, followed by Nala's, then Zara's. The sequential response sends shivers down Marcus's spine, not from fear, but from the profound recognition that he stands at the center of something unprecedented. A defensive alliance that spans species boundaries, united by intelligence, training, and perhaps something deeper, a shared commitment to protecting what they have found in this unlikely sanctuary. Whatever comes through the darkness, they will face it together. Night descends fully over Whispering Pines, transforming the sanctuary into a landscape of shadows and subtle movements. Security floodlights remain deliberately dimmed. Eleanor's decision to maintain lower visibility gives their defenders the advantage of familiar terrain, while potentially disorienting intruders who might expect a fully illuminated facility. Marcus establishes command position at the security hub, a reinforced room adjacent to the main office building with monitors displaying feeds from cameras positioned throughout the sanctuary. Jim Holloway and two other security team members maintain mobile patrol positions, communicating via radio with encrypted channels, another of Marcus's military-informed upgrades implemented over the past 24 hours. Ranger sits alert beside Marcus, amber eyes fixed on the northern perimeter displays, where thermal imaging shows 4 distinct heat signatures, approaching with disciplined spacing that confirms Marcus's suspicions. These are not opportunistic trespassers, but trained operatives, moving with tactical precision. They're maintaining 30-meter intervals, Marcus observes to Eleanor, who stands beside him monitoring the situation. Classic infiltration formation for unknown terrain minimizes risk of total team compromise. From single detection, they're coming directly toward the lion enclosure, Eleanor notes, concern evident in her voice, not the main buildings or research facilities. The observation confirms their theory. Whoever sent these intruders is primarily concerned with the lions and potentially Ranger, living evidence of the classified program they've begun to uncover. The approaching team isn't here for conventional theft or vandalism, but for targeted elimination of specific assets. Time to implement our surprise, Marcus decides, reaching for the radio. All positions, prepare for Protocol Nimbus. Execute. On my mark. Protocol Nimbus, named after the Latin word for storm cloud, represents the unorthodox defensive strategy Marcus developed over the past 12 hours. Rather than attempting to apprehend the intruders immediately, they will allow controlled penetration into the sanctuary while channeling movement toward predetermined interception points where tactical advantage favors the defenders. The strategy depends heavily on Rangers' demonstrated ability to coordinate with the Lions, using their collective awareness to track intruder movements and maintain a flexible response perimeter. A capability that still astounds the scientific minds at Whispering Pines, but which Marcus has pragmatically incorporated into defensive planning. 3 minutes to outer fence contact, reports Holloway from his concealed position near the North Service Road. They're carrying what appear to be tactical rifles with suppression systems. Night vision equipment confirmed. Marcus absorbs this information with grim recognition. The equipment profile suggests military or paramilitary background, professionals with lethal capability and specific mission parameters. The stakes of this confrontation have elevated beyond security concerns to potential life or death conflict. All personnel maintain maximum cover, Marcus instructs via radio. Observation only at this stage. No engagement without direct authorization. As the intruders reach the perimeter fence, their methodical approach confirms Marcus's assessment of their training level. Using specialized cutting tools, they create an opening with minimal noise disruption, then proceed through sanctuary grounds in diamond formation, a standard movement pattern for small tactical units in potentially hostile territory. Instead of triggering immediate alarms or flooding the area with light, the sanctuary's modified security systems remain passive, gathering intelligence while allowing the intruders to commit fully to their incursion. Only Ranger's soft whine betrays the tension of watching threats enter their territory without immediate challenge. "Patience, buddy," Marcus murmurs, resting a reassuring hand on the German Shepherd's head. "We're letting them show their hand." First, the intruders' movement pattern becomes clear as they advance. They're proceeding directly toward the lion enclosure via the most concealed route possible, bypassing main buildings and avoiding open spaces where they might be exposed. Their efficiency suggests prior knowledge of the sanctuary layout, possibly from satellite imagery or earlier reconnaissance. They're heading for the eastern service entrance to the lion habitat, Eleanor observes, watching the thermal signatures converge toward a maintenance access point typically used by staff for feeding and enclosure cleaning. Marcus nods, the intruder's intent becoming increasingly clear. They're not here to transport 3 adult lions. Their equipment profile suggests elimination, not capture. The realization settles heavily in the command center. These intruders have come to kill the lions, to destroy evidence of capabilities that someone has determined must remain hidden. The ethical calculus of their defensive response shifts accordingly. They're not merely protecting property, but preventing the execution of extraordinary beings whose cognitive abilities may redefine understanding of animal intelligence. Marcus makes the call. Implement Phase 2 of Protocol Nimbus. Ranger with me. The German Shepherd is immediately at attention, body language shifting from alert observation to operational readiness. Marcus leads him from the command center toward a position that will intercept the intruder's path well before they reach the lion enclosure, a strategic choke point where natural terrain features limit movement options and enhance defensive advantage. "We're moving to position Echo," Marcus informs the security team via radio. "Maintain perimeter coverage. Sheriff's Department ETA 13 minutes. Though county law enforcement has been notified, the reality of their rural location means external assistance remains precious minutes away, time the Lions may not have if the intruders reach their objective. The responsibility for immediate defense falls to the sanctuary's own resources." Marcus and Ranger move through the darkness with practiced efficiency, the veteran drawing on years of combat experience and the dog demonstrating his specialized training with every silent step. They reach the intercept position, a dense stand of pines overlooking a narrow service path the intruders must traverse to reach the lion enclosure. With minutes to spare, "Hold," Marcus whispers, directing Ranger to a concealed position beside him. From this vantage point, they can observe the approaching team while remaining hidden among the trees. The intruders appear moments later, moving in tight formation with weapons at ready position. Even in the dim light, their professional demeanor is evident. These are not amateur trespassers, but individuals with tactical training and deadly intent. Each carries a rifle with mounted suppressor and what appears to be specialized ammunition. Tranquilizers for initial immobilization, Marcus. Suspects, followed by lethal measures once the targets are incapacitated. "Sheriff's Department approaching main entrance," reports Holloway via radio. "County tactical team 2 minutes behind them." The timing proves fortunate. As exterior law enforcement arrives, the intruders complete their withdrawal from sanctuary property, leaving behind equipment fragments and valuable evidence in their hasty retreat. More importantly, they depart without achieving their presumed objective. The Lions remain secure, their extraordinary capabilities intact and undimmed. In Chiusantetsa, the command center where Eleanor has monitored the entire operation, scientific astonishment mingles with practical relief. "They implemented a coordinated defense strategy," she states, reviewing footage of Rangers' communications and the Lions' responsive positioning. Not just alert behavior or territorial display, but tactical coordination with specific defensive functions. The implications extend beyond the immediate security situation. What they've witnessed and documented, canine-directed, cross-species tactical coordination with apparent strategic objectives, represents capabilities that defy conventional understanding of animal cognition and communication. Whatever program created these abilities has produced results that transcend the original military applications, suggesting forms of intelligence and cooperation that could transform scientific understanding. As law enforcement secures the sanctuary perimeter and begins processing evidence from the incursion, Marcus returns to the command center with Ranger at his side. The German shepherd carries himself with quiet dignity, showing no signs of stress or agitation despite the intense activity of the past hours. "You did good, buddy," Marcus tells him, kneeling to meet the dog at eye level. Those intelligent amber eyes regard him with what can only be described as mutual respect, one professional acknowledging another across the supposed boundary of species. From the nearby monitors displaying the lion enclosure, Caesar, Nala, and Zara have resumed normal positioning within their habitat, their coordinated defensive formation released now that the threat has passed. Yet they maintain subtle alertness, occasional glances toward the cameras suggesting awareness of ongoing observation. "What happens now?" asks Lisa, who has joined them after ensuring all staff are accounted for and unharmed. Eleanor's expression conveys the weight of scientific responsibility. "We document everything, every communication pattern, every coordinated response, every evidence of cognitive function that exceeds known parameters. We build a case too substantial to dismiss or suppress." And then, Marcus prompts, though he suspects he knows the answer. In the months that follow, Whispering Pines transforms into something extraordinary. With evidence compiled and powerful, Allies secured through strategic information releases, the sanctuary gains special protected status. The attempted cover-up becomes national news, bringing public scrutiny that shields Ranger and the Lions from further attempts at elimination. Marcus officially adopts Ranger, their bond growing stronger each day. Together with Eleanor and her team, they establish the Interspecies Communication Research Center within the sanctuary, where scientists document the remarkable abilities of these animals while ensuring their dignity and freedom remain intact. The lions, Caesar, Nala, and Zara, flourish under this new paradigm. Their enclosure expands, and daily sessions with Ranger strengthen their unusual connection. Visitors from around the world witness demonstrations of their coordinated behaviors, marveling at intelligence that challenges fundamental assumptions about animal consciousness. For Marcus, the journey from wounded veteran to guardian of extraordinary beings brings healing he never expected to find. The nightmares that once plagued him fade, replaced by purpose and connection. In saving Ranger from barbed wire that fateful morning, he unknowingly set in motion his own rescue, finding family among creatures society might label as mere animals, but who demonstrate souls as profound as any human. As sanctuary visitors, watch Ranger and the lions communicate across species boundaries. Many leave with transformed perspectives on the intelligence that exists beyond human experience, and the responsibility we bear to recognize and protect it. Thank you for joining us for this incredible true story. If you enjoyed this journey of courage, connection, and discovery across species, please subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary tales from the natural world that will change how you see animal intelligence forever.